Spectacular Spider-Man was a kid's show for all intents and purposes. It never had to tackle themes and ideas that were more adult if it didn't want to. But one of the greatest benefits to this show was the creative team's willingness to cover real adult issues. Whether it's Peter not being able to pay his bills properly, constant feelings of anxiety, anger, and guilt, sadness. This could have easily just been a joke and action show, but they chose to go further with it. And so today, as we're winding down to the end of this first season, I thought it poignant to cover addiction, because that is a heavy, prevalent theme throughout about mid-season in season 1 through the rest of the season. And we see two prime candidates of different types of addictions in this show. So I actually want to take a bit of a departure with how I do this video and start by actually talking about Harry instead of Peter, because Harry showcases addiction in his own unique way throughout probably the midpoint of the first season throughout the end of it as well. So I minimize the amount of comments that will bring up the fact that I'm not addressing certain plot twists and changes. I'm presenting this information as it was presented to the characters. So as Harry gets this information, that's how I'll present it. As Peter is given the information, that's how I'll present it. I've watched this show before, a lot of times before, so I know all of the plot twists and turns, but I will address them when we get to them and how they affect the character when we get there. But I think it's also important to talk about how the character feels pre-twist, especially with some ideas like, we know Harry Osborn was never Green Goblin in this show, and it was always his dad, but it was one of the big setups for the beginning of this show, so I want to present as though that's really what's going to happen. And with all of that said and out of the way, it's time we actually get to talking about Harry Osborn, and understanding where he is at the start of this show, and how he gets to where he's going to be. Harry is very much a side character, especially in the early episodes of this show, only ever appearing to really have banter with Peter and Gwen. As a matter of fact, Gwen is far more of an important character earlier on in the show than Harry is. He's kind of just there, almost third-wheeling it at times because of the tension between Gwen and Peter romantically. But to him, this is kind of all he has. We are shown from the very first episode that Harry himself doesn't exactly have that great of a home life. His dad isn't really proud of any accomplishments Harry has and is almost constantly comparing him to Peter and the mental accomplishments and academic accomplishments that Peter has gotten. Or he compares Harry to his other classmates when it comes to being on a sports team. So for Harry, he just feels like he never does enough for his dad, and even when he does go out of his way to really try and do things like try and increase his GPA and do better in school, he will often rely on the few friends that he has, such as Peter Parker or Gwen Stacy. Now, we're never really given a reason for why Gwen lets him down more so, but we are shown directly how Peter constantly lets Harry down. Harry doesn't know Peter is Spider-Man, so for all intents and purposes to Harry, Peter is constantly ditching him and abandoning their friendship to go do whatever it is he's doing. As Peter doesn't even get to rely on the excuse that his Aunt May is in financial trouble, because he never even says that to Harry. Harry never knows about any of this stuff because Peter kind of keeps him in the dark on the back end of that. Meanwhile, Gwen does know these things. So when Harry goes out of his way to ask Peter for help when it comes to studying for the next test, he's really putting all of his stock into Peter. He believes that relationship is really strong, and he's really trying to get help in that class.
Oh man, Harry. I totally
Blew me off, Pete!
I know, Harry. Look, I'm worthless, but
Nothing. Worthless covers it.
And what does Peter do? He blows him off to go be Spider-Man. We know why. Peter needs to save the day, but Harry doesn't. And Harry continues to feel abandoned by Peter constantly throughout the show. That's just the main example of it. Harry essentially feels isolated, and that's a key factor we'll keep going back to with his character, is the dude just feels so alone, even within his small friend group that had constantly kept tight. Peter had put a lot of strain on the friend group by being Spider-Man and constantly abandoning them for all intents and purposes because they can't understand why. Couple that sense of abandonment with a really terrible home life, which is something I really enjoyed, whether it was from the comics or just from Harry as a general character, was the idea that just because Harry comes from a well-off and affluent family, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have problems. As a matter of fact, Harry has his own unique set of problems, typically stemming from the fact that his father cares very little for him, especially in this continuity. Norman Osborn takes every single second he can on screen with Harry to belittle him, demean him, kick him out of meetings, not talk to him, avoid him. It's really sad in all honesty. And so Harry decides one day he's going to break out of his shell and start doing his own thing. When there is football tryouts that have been announced, he is eager and ecstatic to try out for the football team because he sees this as his way to not only get in with the in-crowd at high school to make new friends, but he also sees it as a way to win approval from his father, something he so desperately wants. We touch more on that in the second season of the show, but Harry desperately wanted approval from his dad. It's all he ever really wanted.
Hey, Mom. Dad?
Harry? What happened to you? And what's with the helmet? Going to a costume party?
Trying out for the team.
Football? Not really a strong suit, is it?
And so with his father continuing to disapprove of Harry and the tryouts not going necessarily in his favor, he starts to lash out at the people close to him. For example, he gets mad at Peter because Peter is also trying out for the football team at this time. And that's something I talked about in my video about Spider-Man and responsibility from last month. We know why Peter wanted to try out for the football team. We know the reasons he wanted to do these things. But for Harry, it meant so much more to him. And this would be another way that Peter steals from Harry his father's affection. Or at least that's the way Harry might look at it. Because throughout the show, we have seen that Harry has gotten little praise from his dad, but Peter is constantly getting praised by Norman Osborn. Peter is constantly being put up on this pedestal.
So what's this about a lab job?
At ESU, working with Kurt Connors.
Connors, huh? Quite an opportunity. Don't suppose you were considered for the honor, Harry?
No, sir.
And so I'm not really surprised that he would start to lash out at Peter. I'm honestly surprised he didn't go further in lashing out from the feelings of jealousy. And all of this is quite literally a recipe for disaster. Harry feels isolated and alone with no friends. He has no real outlets because outside of, say, the football team that he's trying to get on, we're not shown that he has anything else. Let me make that clear. We're not shown that he has anything else. His mother is in the show, but she's completely nonverbal in every instance we see her, so we don't know what his relationship is like to his mom. And knowing him and how it is to his father, it's probably not very good because he's almost constantly isolated at home. This is essentially the perfect storm to start an addiction. And so what does Harry look into doing? He takes an experimental formula known as Globulin Green in order to help boost his performance in school, in sports, and as well, it just makes him feel good. It makes him feel whole. And so he starts to use it not only to get on the football team, but also to help him get through school, get through classes, do everything he needs to do. And at the beginning, it starts off great. Because, at least in Harry's mind, of Globulin Green, he has made it with the in-crowd. The dude gets a date to homecoming, and as well, he gets to have a bunch of these friends on the football team. He's finally made it. His old fractured friend group he can leave behind for the people in front of him. He even gets votes to be homecoming king because shout out Hobie. He's the GOAT, man. Sorry, I had to cut out like a 2-minute rant about Hobie. Regardless, even when Harry is at the top of everything and feels like he's doing so well, he's got a date to homecoming, everything is going great, Peter somehow manages to upstage him once again because Peter brings Mary Jane to the dance, in which everybody in this show quit. And to make things even worse, he ends up finding out that his new in-crowd, all of those football players and all the people he's hanging out with, pretty much just valued him for his money more than anything else. They only seemed to care that the limo ride was gone now and nothing more, with Betsy even saying that she should have waited to dump Harry until after the dance. It's really messed up, and the only person that seems to actually, be decent there is Hobie because Hobie's just that guy.
You're so selfish! Everyone knows you don't dump the guy with the limo! Nothing personal, Kenny, until the day after the dance!
Where is Osborn anyway?
Not only did he take a dose earlier, but this is the second time he is taking a dose. He is double dosing. Now, for all intents and purposes, this was supposed to be a parallel to Green Goblin disappearing earlier in the night and then showing back up. But outside of that, in that episode, we kind of just move on. Harry seems to rebound after Gloria broke up with him, and everything seems to be okay for him. He's getting invited to Coney Island with the guys, specifically by Hobie, and he plans to go. So just looking over my script real quick, I realized that I wrote Hobie for every single instance of Rand in my script, and Rand appears a few times. So big apologies. This is Rand. Randy is awesome. Rand is cool. Rant over. Back to your regularly scheduled program. But we're starting to see that his constant redosing of Globulin Green is starting to affect Harry. He pretty much needs to take 1 to 2 vials a day just to not only feel normal, but be able to function properly at school or on the football field. Something that was once just a simple performance enhancer for him is now desperately needed for him to function and is actively messing up his bodily functions. Gwen is constantly finding Harry acting strange or not like himself, to the point of finding Harry passed out after school, taking a cat nap on the ground. And Harry tries his best to brush it off, but Gwen's not that stupid.
Please, I'm too beat for serious tonight, but hey, a bunch of us are going to Coney Island tomorrow. Come along, it's been a while since you and I hung out.
And then we'll have a real talk?
Oh, totally, okay? We'll see ya.
Harry pretty much doesn't talk to Gwen when they go to Coney Island. He avoids her completely. He hides behind his money and new friends because he's trying to fill a void that isn't really fillable. He tries to fill it with Globulin Green, he tries to fill it with the guys, he tries to fill it in any way possible, and he avoids the only person that could potentially actually help him because he's so deep into it now that admitting you have an addiction, Harry doesn't want to admit that he has a problem. He also doesn't want to admit that because it would invalidate him being a sports player. And it's also even worse when Peter doesn't even truly address this, nor really pay attention to the fact that Harry is struggling, and almost completely ignores it. Harry even abandons his friends at one point who are all at Coney Island hanging out, just so he can go do more Globulin Green by himself. I think this is a really great parallel to Harry in the comics, in which he does suffer from a substance abuse disorder as well there, and I think they tackled it really well using a substance like Globulin Green in this show. I like that it took multiple episodes for them to even figure out Harry had an issue, and that it was really only one person that did. They say you can always tell when a person is struggling, but I don't believe that is true. I think a lot of people don't really want to take the time to actually look at a person and determine if they are struggling, because that's hard. And that's really, really painful, not only on the person that is caring for the one who is struggling, but also just on the person who's struggling in general. And we pretty much see Harry lash out at Gwen when Gwen does figure out that he is struggling, because Harry doesn't believe that he needs the help. He believes that what he's doing is not only good for him long term, but all that he needs.
Harry, whatever that stuff is, you need help.
This is the help. 4.0 GPA, football stud, in crowd, all thanks to the green.
Harry, no!
From here on out, I'm going to present the information as the show shows us and tells us. I do, as I previously said earlier in the video, understand that Harry himself is not the Green Goblin. I've seen the show before. Also, spoiler, for a show that's like over 10 years old. Regardless, I'm going to treat it as though we don't know this. I'm going to treat it like the information is being presented to us as it's being presented to the characters, because I believe it's important to Harry's development. Harry continues to dose on Globulin Green, and it is implied to us as the audience that every time he uses, he essentially blacks out and becomes the Green Goblin, a manifestation for every single pain and trauma that Harry has gone through. And the show sets it up extraordinarily well. The idea that this is Harry truly lashing out at all of the things that cause him problems and issues. Now, it might have seemed a little weird at first, but the more and more we see the Green Goblin, the more and more he goes on to attack Norman Osborn's dealings. The more and more he goes on to attack people like the Big Man, trying to take over crime. And in the penultimate episode of this arc, it is revealed to us that Harry Osborn, or at least revealed to Spider-Man, that Harry Osborn has been the Goblin this entire time, and that he has been doing this as a sort of revenge for the lack of care his father has shown for him. A complete lack of empathy or love or just about anything he has gotten at home at all. Harry has pretty much felt abandoned completely, not only in his home life, but also just in his everyday average dealings with his friends. And so he has begun to take it out in this persona that is supposedly helping him cope. It's of course just an allegory for when substance abuse disorder gets so bad that you black out and you simply don't remember what you've been doing. When you have gotten to a point where you so desperately need the substance, you're willing to do whatever it takes to get it, whether that's burning your closest friends or family. It's a really sad reality that a lot of people are faced with. And when confronted with all of this, Harry really does believe this is him, and that he still doesn't believe he has a problem. But one of the best scenes in the show is we finally get to see Norman Osborn, Mr. I Don't Apologize, not only addressing the fact that he failed his son horribly, but that a lot of this was his fault, as this Globulin Green product was something Norman created that Harry got his hands on. For once, we finally see Norman being categorized as fairly regular as Harry gets to air out his grievances with his father.
Or you! You told me to man up, so I took the green to become the son you always wanted me to be. To become a man like you.
And a sentiment that this episode really harps on is the idea that Harry doesn't need to go be arrested and be sent to prison, because in all reality that's not really going to help him. Harry is a sick individual who truly needed help, and at the time Spider-Man understood that, and so did Norman. And so they organized to get Harry the help he needed, surround him with a true and stable support system, around with people that love and care for him, because at the end of the day that's really the only way he's going to help battle this addiction. It's truly the only way Harry's ever going to grow from it. And it's just unfortunate that almost nobody else in his life except for Gwen was able to recognize the signs until it was too late. And I did all of this. I've spent the last 17 minutes talking about Harry because I think it perfectly parallels Peter Parker and his battle with addiction in this show, literally only a few episodes later. But first, I think we should do a little catching up with Peter and see where he's at in his life. For all intents and purposes, Peter's life is going fairly well by this point in the show. He's taking pictures, he's giving them to Jameson, he's making money, he is flirting with Betty Brant, trying to get a date to the dance. Everything is fairly going well for him. He's helping Aunt May pay the bills, and while it's not perfect, because he's not necessarily balling, so he can't, spend all of the money he wants to when it comes to getting his date Betty Brant corsages and things for the dance, he's still fairly happy with what he's being able to provide, not only for himself but for Aunt May, as well as protecting the city at large. Heck, he even found out who's been running most of the criminal operations in New York and who's been causing him the most trouble, that being the big man, L. Thompson Lincoln, Tombstone, whatever alias you want to use. And it's honestly hilarious that Tombstone even thought that he could potentially buy Spider-Man, that he would be able to just hand Spider-Man a sum of money that he needs in order for Peter to go away and not deal with his business. And while that money could have helped Peter, it's his ability to stand firm and tall in his moral high ground, which is honestly deserved in this situation, that allows him to pretty much keep being Spider-Man and keep being true to himself. And so while he turns down the money, I don't really necessarily think it's a sad part of events for Peter. Keep that in mind for the next video. As well, Peter ends up not getting the date with Betty Brant, thanks in part to his aunt, but he does end up getting to go with the hottest girl his age, Mary Jane Watson. And once again, Peter is able to completely upstage and outshow all of his classmates, even though he promised to bring a hot 30-something. He instead brought somebody who is considered very attractive for his own age, of which he immediately abandons to go be Spider-Man. So again, the theme of responsibility and having no fun in Peter's life because he has to be a responsible adult at the age of 16. So unfortunately for him, he has to deal with the Green Goblin for most of the night, essentially ruining his homecoming and almost any chance that he believed he had with Mary Jane. And while dealing with the new crazy psycho isn't exactly high on Peter's list of wants, the end of the night is actually very sweet. Peter makes it to the dance just in time to have one final dance with Mary Jane, so his night wasn't even a complete waste. It's honestly really sweet that she stayed and waited for him, despite the fact that he literally abandoned her for no other reason than to go take pictures for his aunt. Something I'm not even sure if Mary Jane was fully cognizant of as a true problem for Peter at this time, as this is the first time they've met. And then at Coney Island in the next episode, Peter might as well be on cloud 9. He's getting to hang out and spend time with Liz Allen, somebody we have been hinted out constantly throughout this first season could be a love interest for Peter. And the two of them spend a lot of time together in this really cute montage that I found extremely enjoyable. The two of them had great chemistry and also a few funny moments regarding his secret identity. What is also funny, though, is that this would end up leading to the direct result of a breakup between both Liz Allen and Flash. But all of this happiness and overexcitement would start to slowly crumble down for Peter. He was getting enough wins and losses, it was pretty much evening out, but he's going to start to lose pretty hard again. He has continually ignored the fact that Harry is having issues of his own, and the fact that Gwen wants to address them, because he wants to keep having a good time.
Okay, not the look. I mean, sure, the football thing's gone to his head, but look at him. He's a walking commercial for Happy.
It isn't that. Hi, Gwen. Mind if I borrow Petey?
Don't worry, Gwen, Harry's...
Peter has to abandon his friends once again to go play Spider-Man and deal with the new villain of the week. It's unfortunate, but honestly not the saddest thing to have come up for him, thankfully. But he is responsible for the breakup between Flash and Liz Allen, at least partly responsible. I'm not going to put the full blame on him because Flash is a real tool in this first season of the show. Regardless, this all isn't exactly sitting the most well with Peter.
Pete, I know it's not the best time, what with the soap opera and the super villain and everything, but we really need to talk to Harry. I'm worried about him.
Yeah, okay.
And to make things even worse, he just found out his best friend was not only truly struggling with a substance disorder, but had become a true supervillain in the process. And Peter has to go against every fiber in his being not to turn his best friend in, because he knows that's not where his friend is going to get the most help. Peter has to put every ounce of empathy he has into his close friend. Essentially, Peter has kind of found himself at another decently low point in his life, and it's pretty sad, all things considered.
Usual.
Sorry, I went looking for Harry, but I never found him.
Then you probably haven't heard. Harry's taking a leave of absence from school to travel abroad and get the help he needs.
And that makes it a happy ending, right?
But it's all not a total and complete wash for Peter. For all intents and purposes, he's actually having a fairly decent time despite one of his closest friends being shipped away. Peter's home life is still decently well, with Aunt May being fairly healthy, Bill is mostly taken care of. As well, there's been a brand new scientific discovery that's exciting. Peter's relationship with Eddie Brock has been somewhat mended and repaired, the two being able to be close enough to call each other once again. His relationship with Gwen is actually getting stronger due to the fact that Harry is no longer in the picture. So Peter actually has a decent support system around him at the time, even if he's not going to be able to take photographs of the alien because he lost out on his ESU internship. But luckily enough for Peter, he's still going to take the photos because a cat burglar happens to come about and try and steal the ooze, as they're calling it for right now. You know, I'm just going to call it the symbiote because that's better for me and better for my script. This is also the first signs of temptation that Peter is really being shown throughout this episode. I mean, this is Black Cat we're talking about after all. Who's gonna be able to resist that for real? She is constantly tempting him throughout this episode, essentially asking him to break his moral code to help steal the ooze, or to help her commit whatever crime of the week that she wants to commit for whatever her biggest buyer is. And while Peter elects not to give in to the temptation this time around, what ends up happening is a little bit worse. Somehow the ooze has gone completely missing, and nobody knows where it is. Kurt Connors was there the night that Spider-Man was there, and unfortunately for him, not only is the ooze missing, But now Kurt Connors wasn't really there last night, and Peter took all of these photos from the skylight and didn't contact the police or do anything, despite Kurt Connors saying he would. So Spider-Man is not only confused and feels like Kurt Connors has sold him out, but now his relationship with Eddie Brock is effectively permanently tarnished, because they all see it as Peter took photos and never said anything. Not to mention the fact that J. Jonah Jameson continues to keep posting bad about Spider-Man. He's not exactly feeling at his greatest. So when he discovers that he is the one who stole the ooze, and that it has somehow bonded itself to his suit, it's definitely a little weird. And while he does want to return it initially, what he ends up finding is that this suit, while not only somewhat alive, also helps him to be a better Spider-Man. It helps him to save more lives. It helps him to do more as Spider-Man. He's able to do things that he wasn't able to do previous, and he's all being fueled by the guilt and loss of the people around him. He's able to save a man from a plane crash that not only took his parents, but also took Eddie Brock's parents with him, and it's all almost completely attributed to this brand new suit that he's wearing. He's able to do more, he's able to take more photos to make more money, he's able to save more people. This is all a complete net positive.
If I can use the ooze to help more people as Spider-Man, and not incidentally earn a bit more photo money as Peter Parker, then maybe it's okay that I sort of unintentionally stole the slime from the Connors lab. And maybe it's better for everyone if I don't return it.
All this while somebody is actually impersonating Spider-Man and getting him even more bad press while stealing money is not exactly doing wonders for Peter's mental health. But Peter feels good because he has the suit. He feels like he can accomplish more, as though he can do more. It's funny because he just watched Harry fall into the exact same pitfalls, for different reasons, mind you, but he's going to fall into the exact same temptation that Harry does, simply because he believes he needs it to be better. He even gets to the point of teaming up with Black Cat to help him get on the boat to stop the imposter Spider-Man, more fixated on that than really saving lives that night anyways. Oh, and we get a great gag.
Almost there. Hold on tight.
Don't worry, I don't slip.
Not why I said that.
Loved that gag as a kid, but I never really got it until now, so there's that for you. Regardless, Spider-Man is pretty much hyper-fixated on clearing his own name and getting rid of the imposter Spider-Man more than anything else for that matter, and it's really more selfish than anything else. That's really the whole reason he wants to do this, outside of obviously getting a criminal off the street. It's more of a selfish want from Peter, less than an altruistic want. And that's something we'll continue to see throughout a majority of the time with his black suit. He starts to be more selfish. And while being selfish in certain aspects and sometimes isn't necessarily inherently bad, for example, dealing with the chameleon, it's not something you want to be doing 100% of the time, especially as a hero like Spider-Man. He becomes extraordinarily reliant on the suit, and we get to slowly see the way his thinking is changed and corrupted. Even the greatest heroes that we might see in front of us, such as Spider-Man, someone who seems so incorruptible and true to the law, is often willing to bend and break it when he believes he is helping it the most.
The chameleon did with the ET.
Actually, what are you doing? You tell the truth and they'll take the suit away. And you need its power to help people.
We see a complete change in his thinking when it comes to the ooze and wanting to keep it. He believes it benefits him too much to let go of, even if it is changing the way in which he thinks or the way in which he handles things. I mean, dude doesn't even bother to actually take Black Cat to prison. He'd rather just get a makeout session, which I can't blame him, alright? But like, dog, you're Spider-Man. And what's so interesting about this addiction from Peter is that it stems almost completely differently from the way Harry's did. Harry felt that he had this complete lack of a stable home life and a lack of a stable community around him, whereas Peter himself seems to still have both of those. He still has a stable friend group, even if it's not perfect. He still has stable family members around him, things to truly care about, and yet he still finds himself running towards that addiction because it all stems from his guilt. His guilt over the loss of Uncle Ben, his guilt over the loss of his parents, his guilt over not being a good enough Spider-Man and taking care of the city the way in which he wants to, his guilt over not properly taking care of his friends, and he believes the suit can help him do that in totality. And I mean, you can see it on screen, the suit is extraordinarily helpful for him, but Peter is also willfully ignoring a lot of things. For example, he's not really on top of his A game with New York. He's kind of just brushing off the fact that Eddie Brock, his longest friend ever, is pissed off at him and blowing him off for taking photos. And while Peter would normally be understanding and introspective of a moment like this, he's not, because he has the suit. He believes that with it, he is better than everything around him, and he can continue taking on responsibilities that he really can't.
I've lost my oldest friend. Well, who needs him? I've got the cool new suit. And a little something to take my mind off my troubles.
For Peter, this addiction doesn't stem from wanting the love or trying to fill a void of something missing. For him, this is a boost, a benefit to being able to take responsibility for all of the things he wants to take responsibility for. It is extraordinarily noble at first, or at least that's how it starts, until it starts to affect and completely impede upon what he believes in as Spider-Man. His willingness to bend the rules starts to show more and more the longer in which he uses the substance. Because that's what the black suit has always been an allegory for, at least post its original introduction, is an allegory for substance abuse. And of course, Peter believes he needs to use it more and more, especially considering the fact that a majority of his villains just teamed up together to form the Sinister Six. Peter's real, true, and first honest test of supervillains all combining together, all in the event that they can hopefully kill Peter Parker. They all broke out of Rikers Island after organizing what is honestly one of the funniest escape scenarios I might have seen in a comic book recently, because who lets Electro burn through his actual magnetic handle holds, whatever they were using to contain his power? To me, it's a little ridiculous and funny, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. And the fight goes so poorly that Peter actually has to escape. He actually cannot, even with the power of his new suit, fight anybody, at least not really on the Sinister Six level, simply because he's completely outmatched and overwhelmed. He has to run. And when he does so, not only is he angry and tired, but we also see different mood shifts for him. For example, J. Jonah Jameson just found out that Aunt May had a heart attack and that she's in the hospital. And what does J. Jonah Jameson do? Because he's genuinely a pretty decent guy in most continuities. He tries to reach out to Peter and call him. Peter completely blows off J. Jonah Jameson's call, assuming he's just going to rant at him for not getting photos. Peter's lack of empathy starts to truly show through for a majority of the episodes following his use of the black suit.
Jonah, you're calling to yell at me for not getting pics of those bozos beating me up. That we don't need.
Which is odd coming from a man who would consistently check in with his Aunt May every single night. There isn't literally a night that goes by in this show that we've seen where Peter doesn't interact with Aunt May in some form or fashion. Yet this night he completely ignores her because he's tired and exhausted. He doesn't even bother going to check up on his aunt to even notice the fact that she's in danger. Peter literally just saved her earlier in the day from the Sinister Six, but doesn't even bother to go check on her because it's not at the forefront of his mind. His addiction and his substance use has quite literally taken him over, and much how we were shown with Harry that it causes him to black out and take actions that he wouldn't normally take, the suit quite literally takes control of Peter in his sleep and causes him to put on one of the best action scenes in the show, but also one of his most brutal. He takes down the Sinister Six with extreme precision, efficiency, and anger. He fights extremely violently, or shall I say the symbiote fights extremely violently. It doesn't necessarily have a stop nor moral code for Peter, and Peter doesn't even seem to have a real problem with this, even when he does become conscious. I mean, ripping the neural transmitter off the Vulture that lets him connect to his suit, which could cause serious brain damage that Vulture mentions, isn't even a second thought for the symbiote. It does it because it's quick and efficient. The way in which he deals with Sandman, well, not necessarily the most brutal, definitely doesn't look the most comfortable, considering he's just scrambling his atoms. And then as well, the way in which he chose to take down Dr. Octopus. If it was not for the fact that the police were there to stop Peter in his symbioted up form, he probably literally would have killed Octavius in this moment because he was looking to do so. The symbiote, and by extension Peter, when under the influence, doesn't have as much discretion as he usually would. And it's to the point that he doesn't even really care. When he notices the symbiote actually took over his body and used him, essentially, as a weapon of war, he doesn't care very much. He was able to take more photos, he was able to get more money, and he was able to stop the criminals. To him, that's all that mattered.
This wasn't me wearing the suit. This was the suit wearing my body. This alien, it's some kind of symbiote. Still, what do we care? The 6 were put down hard. Parker gets paid for the photos. What else matters?
And it's that idea of we, as though they are one singular being, as though that addiction for Peter has become so ingrained into who he is, he starts to believe that these actions he's taking are normal for him. It's honestly a really sad route to addiction that we see a lot of people take in real life. They believe to be boosting themselves and to be helping themselves when really they are tearing themselves down. And Peter even begins to push away those closest to him. For example, he hasn't even managed to check on Aunt May, and it's been almost 24 hours since she's had a heart attack and has been in the hospital. And he thinks she's just asleep upstairs.
She's in the hospital.
Mary Jane has to go out of her way to tell Peter this information. It's honestly fairly sad way of Peter finding this out, because he could have known so much earlier had he cared to check in, had he wanted to check in. Again, we're seeing the early signs of it, but going forward, Peter will continue to push those close to him away. And while you could argue the symbiote is a net positive right now, it never stays that way. Addiction is never a net positive. I can speak from experience, because addiction doesn't just come in the form of substances. It can also come in the form of sugar, for example, your job maybe. I know I definitely struggle with my want to output a ton of content, but also taking the time to be around my family, to be around my friends, and to be present in my own life. I have let this channel sometimes just be my life for weeks on end. That's an addiction. It's something so prevalent that it affects each and every one of us every single day of our lives, and we might not even notice it until somebody points it out to us. It's why I harped so much about having a community close to each and every one of you, and to have people around you that genuinely care. Have a Gwen in your life, because it's important. And as I go on to say all of this, I will not be covering episodes 12 and 13 in this video, because we're closing in on 40 minutes, and I believe that the final 2 episodes of the first season, in which we see Peter in the symbiote for the last time and we get to see Venom, deserve its own complete video to itself. That, and I have a Young Justice video I gotta make that's like over an hour long probably, and I need to save my voice, because I don't know if y'all can tell, I'm a little cooked on my voice right now. So thank you all so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you want to leave a like, feel free to leave a like on the video. It helps out the channel a lot. If you want to leave a dislike the video, and then tell me down below why you dislike the video, as constructive criticism helps me to be a better creator for all of you. Oh my gosh. You'd think I get better at these considering how often I do them. And finally, I do run a Patreon. If you want to join, it is $1 a month. You'll get access to these videos unedited, early, and as well you'll get access to the Discord server where you can interact with me and the rest of the fans, and just pretty much anybody else who's in there. As well, I want to go ahead and give a shout out to all of those in the $5 and above tier who are absolutely amazing. So shout out eSibert13, shout out Gabriel Lafonte, Transgers1, Video Gamer 75, Golden Boy 420, Dakota Rawson, Donovan Gomez, and MC Bomb 27. You all are amazing. Hope you all have an absolutely fantastic day.